Today we're making beef short ribs. Short ribs are really tasty, but unless you cook them properly, the meat can be quite tough. So we're going to braise them. And braising is a common method of cooking where the meat is browned quickly over high heat. And then you add a liquid, cover it, and let the meat simmer for a long period of time so that the meat can tenderize, and you let it simmer at a very low temperature. And you can see our short ribs here. There's different ways you can find short ribs. This is the way we prefer. They're a traditional cut. They're on the bone. Sometimes you'll see them cross-cut in very thin strips, and sometimes you can actually find them boneless. So what you're going to need are the short ribs, and then we're going to cook some vegetables up with them. We've got some carrots, some celery, some onion, and for our liquid we're going to use, usually I use beef broth, but I don't have any, so I'm going to use chicken broth today. But I'll give it a little bit of color by putting some tomato paste in. And then we'll add a couple of bay leaves. So let's go to the stove. Okay, so now we're going to start by browning the short ribs. And we're heating up a pan here. And once it gets warm, we'll add just a little bit of oil. We'll add some salt and pepper to the short ribs. And we're just going to leave these in. We're going to brown them on all sides, which will take a few minutes. And the best way to brown them is to just let them sit where they are. Don't keep moving them, but let them sit until they get brown. It just takes patience, but they'll get brown faster that way. So it's been a total of about 8 minutes now. But the short ribs are nicely browned on all sides. So I'm going to turn the heat down and just take these out of the pan. And now I'm going to add the vegetables. You can see that I've cut up the carrots and the onions and the celery. I want to get that in and get that just sweated a little bit. I'm going to add just a little bit of salt. I'll bring some of the moisture out of the vegetables. Then the short ribs are going to go back in with the vegetables. And we're going to cover those about halfway with broth. Again, I'm using chicken broth because I don't have beef broth. So just about halfway up like that, and then I'm going to add just a little bit of tomato paste just because it gives it a little bit of color. I don't want it to be red, but this will give it more of a nice brown color. Then I'm going to add a couple of bay leaves. I'm going to turn this up to high just so I can bring it up to a simmer. And then once it gets to a simmer, we're going to turn it down. We don't want it boiling, but we just want bubbles coming up. So you'll just have to keep an eye on the stove. And then we're going to cover that and let this cook for 2 to 2.5 hours until the meat gets tender. So the short ribs have been simmering now for about 2 hours. And if you can see if I poke a fork in them, they're quite tender, so I think they're done. So I'm going to take the short ribs out and put them on a plate. And what I like to do is make these up the day before. And then put them in the refrigerator, and then they can just be reheated the next day. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, you don't have to worry about cooking them the day that you're going to serve them. But the other thing is, as you can see, when I drain this liquid off, there's going to be quite a bit of fat. And if you allow it to settle, put it in the refrigerator, the fat will harden on the top, and it's a lot easier to skim it off before you make a little bit of a thickened sauce. And then I'm just going to put the vegetables in another dish. This could all go in one dish, but I didn't have a dish big enough. And then what I'm going to want to do is to pour off this liquid. I like to put it into a clear container so that when I'm trying to separate it the next day, I can easily see where the fat is. And so that'll go in the refrigerator overnight, and then we'll finish this up tomorrow. Okay, now the sauce has been in the refrigerator overnight, and the reason I did that is because I wanted to have the fat congeal on top so that it's easy to get off. If you don't do this, your gravy can end up with kind of a slimy feel to it. So I'm just going to take this off. And that's going to leave me with just about 3 cups of the broth, which is where all of the flavor is. So I'm just going to make a sort of a thin gravy. We're going to start with the roux. Since I have 3 cups of the liquid, I'm going to use 4 tablespoons of butter and 4 tablespoons of flour. And the butter will go into the pan and melt. I'll add the flour, and we'll just stir that around. We want to cook, we're making a roux now, and we're going to want to cook this for about a minute or so, just enough to get the raw taste off of the flour. And also doing this will help it incorporate the liquid better. This is what we're ending up with here is what the French call a velouté, which is very much like a bechamel sauce, except instead of adding a milk or a cream product, you add broth. I'm going to start to add the liquid slowly. Now, since this is a brown sauce and I'm using chicken broth, I'm going to add just a little bit more of the tomato paste that I started this with, just to give it a little bit deeper color. I think that's just about the consistency I'm looking for. You can see it's not real thick, but it has a little bit of body. So we'll take that over now and assemble the final dish. Okay, then to serve this, you can either reheat it in a pan, or do like I did. I just put it in the microwave. I've got a little bed of vegetables with the carrots, and then I also boiled up some potatoes. I like it either with boiled potatoes, or sometimes I'll just use egg noodles and just use a bed of egg noodles. And then you've got your gravy here, and you can just spoon the gravy over the top as much as you want, and then I usually put a little in an extra bowl on the side. And there you have it. Now there's another way to thicken the sauce, and that's to use cornstarch rather than a flour and butter roux. And with this method, you just use about a tablespoon of cornstarch for each cup of liquid. But you never want to add the cornstarch directly to the hot liquid, or it'll form lumps. So what you do is make a slurry by adding cold liquid to the cornstarch. Here I have about 3 cups of liquid, so I'm putting 3 tablespoons of cornstarch into a bowl, and adding about 3 or 4 tablespoons of cold liquid, and then stirring it together. Then when the liquid comes to a simmer, I'm going to add the slurry into the hot liquid and just continue to stir it until it thickens. Now, it's not going to get real thick, but you're just adding a little bit of body to the liquid and giving it a bit of a translucent appearance. And I think this produces a more attractive sauce than the roux-based gravy, but it's up to you. And then I add a potato to the dish and pour over the sauce. And finally, I'll add some chopped chives on top of the potatoes. And it's ready to serve up like that.